From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Agriculture is a big business. More than $1 trillion worth of agricultural products are traded internationally every year. But countries may put their own plants at risk when they import fruits, vegetables, wood, and other products. As products are unloaded from ships and planes, some unwelcome visitors may find a new home. The stink bug is one example. This pest eats fruit crops. It is believed to have arrived in the United States from China. Other pests include fruit fly eggs or fungal spores. Some well-known threats include wheat rust, African armyworms, cassava bacterial blight, and the European grapevine moth. The list goes on. To fight the problem, there are new standards under the International Plant Protection Convention. Craig Fedchock is the coordinator of the treaty. He says the purpose of the convention is to develop standards for the trade of plants and plant products. The convention was first approved in 1952. It is recognized as one of the 3 bodies that set standards for the World Trade Organization. New standards for pest risk analysis were released at the convention's annual meeting in Rome. These give greater guidance for deciding whether an imported plant might be a threat to cultivated or wild plants. Craig Fedchock says changes were also made to standards for wood packaging material. Wood packaging can carry pests like beetles that can harm native forests. Agricultural pests are believed to cause billions of dollars in damage each year. Getting an estimate is difficult. Countries may not want their trading partners to know the full extent of the problem. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The slow food movement is growing in most of the Western world. The movement supports small, local farms. It works against huge farms led by international food and agriculture companies. But the slow food movement is not growing very quickly in Africa. So a group called Slow Food International has named a Ugandan man to help it grow. Eddie Mukibi will work to help people in Africa grow healthy food. Slow Food International plans to create 10,000 gardens throughout Africa. Many of the gardens will be in schools. Mr. Mukibi says he hopes they will teach young people about the importance of slow food. There is still knowledge about traditional crops and planting seasons in Africa. He hopes the garden project will reconnect young people to the land. Mr. Mukibi was a student of the crop planting science called agronomy. He discovered that crops being planted in Uganda were sometimes not right for the farming environment. He says he began to understand the importance local foods had to food security, but local foods were quickly disappearing. These traditional products, he says, are used to African conditions, including poor weather. Mr. Mukibi is trying to persuade political leaders and scientists to support the slow food movement. But he says it is hard. They support big industrial farms that can produce a lot of a single crop. But Mr. Mukibi argues that the problem in Africa is not a lack of food. It is that the food is not reaching enough people. He says people should be working to improve ways of sharing food resources. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. People have been growing chrysanthemums for more than 2,000 years. Mums make bright and colorful gardens. People in China and other Asian cultures make tea with the flowers. Giacomo Puccini, the great Italian composer, even named one of his works after chrysanthemums, chrysanthemi. One basic kind of mum is the hardy or garden mum. The other basic kind is the florist mum. The garden mum is better able to handle different growing conditions. The decorative mum is often seen in gardens. Another popular type, the quill mum, has long, straight petals, like a tube or needle. Chrysanthemum blooms can be white, yellow, gold, red, or other colors. Many of the plants grow to 1 meter high. The soil for chrysanthemums should be kept moist, but well drained. Mums grow best in full sunlight. They produce colorful blooms when days get shorter and nights get longer. The life cycle of the plant depends on the amount of daylight. This is why experts advise against placing mums near night lights or street lights. The light may interfere with their normal growth cycle. As a result, the plants may develop buds too soon. In climates where temperatures fall below freezing, plant mums at least 6 weeks before the first frost is expected. That way the plants will be well established for cold weather. To get more blooms, pinch back the branches when new growth has reached 15 centimeters. Squeeze about 5 to 7 centimeters off each branch. Pinch it again when a branch grows another 12 to 15 centimeters. Stop the pinching about 100 days before you want the plants to bloom. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Scientists have made a genetic map of the tomato. Tomatoes are second only to potatoes as the world's most valuable vegetable crop. 8 years of work went into making the map or genome. 300 scientists around the world took part in the project to sequence the tomato's DNA code. Giovanni Giuliano, a researcher in Italy, is part of the Tomato Genome Consortium. He says they started as 10 countries and now have 14. Having the tomato's genetic map will help growers who are always trying to produce a better tomato. Mr. Giuliano says they now know not only what genes are there, but their order. Researchers published the genome of a tomato used by Heinz, the American food company, famous for its tomato ketchup. Ketchup is a thick sauce used on hamburgers, hot dogs, and other foods. Heinz's research manager, Rich Osmankowski, says the company knows what it wants in a tomato. Traits like sugars, and for Heinz, viscosity, or the juice thickness, and the redness of the tomatoes are all very critical traits for us, he says. Those are all controlled by a lot of different genes within the tomato. Mr. Osmankowski says genome sequencing takes away much of the guesswork for breeders of tomatoes or other crops that have been mapped. In his words, by having the genome information, we can pick out those tomato plants that have more of those genes. Until the late 1960s, the tomatoes that Heinz used to make ketchup often cracked open on the vine after a heavy rain. Heinz wanted to develop a variety that would resist that cracking. Breeders used the traditional methods of mating generations of different varieties. The tomatoes they were trying to develop not only had to resist cracking, they also had to resist disease. And they had to be easy to harvest mechanically. Finally, the company came up with the tomato it wanted, called the Heinz 1706. Mr. Osmankowski says the job would have been much easier if there had been a genetic map to follow. There were no genetic tools at the time. But the work today is not just about making better ketchup. Climate change may force many crops to adjust to new conditions. And Mr. Osmankowski says researchers are already using the new genetic tools to help fight new plant diseases. The researchers published the tomato genome in the journal Nature. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. For more news and information for people learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Thanksgiving Day is America's version of a harvest festival. The holiday is celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November. Millions of Americans joined family and friends to give thanks and eat a meal with a history that is centuries old. Early European settlers in North America held other ceremonies where they gave thanks. But what Americans often consider the first Thanksgiving took place in Plymouth Colony. Today, we call it Massachusetts. Those settlers are known as the Pilgrims. They held a 3-day celebration in the fall of 1621. They celebrated the harvest with members of a local Indian tribe. The best-known food that Americans traditionally eat on Thanksgiving is turkey. The nation's turkey producers are expected to raise 242 million birds this year. The government says that is 2% fewer than last year. Last year's turkey production had a value of about $3.5 billion. Thanksgiving turkeys are traditionally served with a bread mixture that some Americans call stuffing. Others call it dressing. Side dishes include cranberries, sweet potatoes, and green beans or other vegetables. The meal traditionally ends with a dessert of pumpkin pie or pecan pie. Some Thanksgiving foods have changed over time. For example, most turkeys these days are bred with larger breasts to provide more white meat. Corn, known in much of the world as maize, has also changed. It tastes much sweeter than the starchier corn of the past. The way Americans prepare for Thanksgiving has also changed. Economist John Anderson of the American Farm Bureau Federation says some people look for ways to save time. He says shortcuts, like buying prepared foods for the holiday, are part of a bigger trend in America. Some people might not have the time or the desire to prepare a big meal, or the space for a lot of guests. Whatever the reason, John Anderson notes that more people go to a restaurant for Thanksgiving dinner than in the past. Aid groups and religious organizations were also busy serving Thanksgiving meals to the needy. The weak economy has increased the number of Americans receiving government assistance to buy food. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Our programs are online with transcripts and MP3 files at voaspecialenglish.com. And you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at VOA Learning English. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Companion planting is the idea that some kinds of plants can help each other grow. Plants that are compatible generally need similar soil, nutrients, and moisture levels. Advice about which plants are compatible is sometimes based more on tradition than fact. But experts say there is evidence to support certain combinations. These can improve harvests, reduce disease, and help control pests by attracting helpful insects. For example, some kinds of soil bacteria take nitrogen from the air and make it into a form that plants can use. The plants hold or fix the nitrogen in their roots. Legumes are especially good at nitrogen fixing. Then, any crops that share the same space as the legumes can get the nitrogen as the roots decompose. Beans and potatoes can also share territory well because their roots reach different levels in the soil. Deep-rooted vegetables get nutrients and moisture from lower down in the soil, so they do not compete with plants with shallower roots. But some plants placed together can harm each other's development. For example, tomatoes do not like wet soil, but watercress does, so you would probably want to keep them separated. Some kinds of produce should be kept apart even after being harvested. This is because of ethylene gas. Ethylene is a plant hormone that can cause some kinds of produce to ripen too quickly. This risk of ripening too soon is why markets often separate high ethylene producing foods from those that are sensitive to the gas. But if you put an apple in a bag with a green banana, the ethylene from the apple will make the banana ripen sooner. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. Tall or short, fat or thin, natural, plastic, or metal. Whatever the choice, the National Christmas Tree Association says Americans bought over 40 million Christmas trees last year. Christmas trees are grown and harvested in all 50 states. Christmas time in the city usually means buying trees already cut and waiting to be sold. But some people like to drive to tree farms. Others wait for their tree to come to them, or they order one from the pages of a catalog, or even on the internet. Some say the easiest thing of all is to buy an artificial tree with Christmas lights already on it. The National Christmas Tree Association represents growers and sellers of most of the farm-raised Christmas trees in the United States. The group estimates that 9.5 million artificial trees were sold in 2011 compared to almost 31 million natural ones. So people still enjoy the appearance and smell of natural trees more. The group says people paid an average of around $35 for a natural Christmas tree and twice as much for an artificial one. But artificial trees, which mostly come from China, can be reused for years. Most natural trees are cut up and recycled, but some people buy trees that can be planted. The association says 16% of people who bought natural trees last year chose them at a farm and cut the tree themselves. 84% bought them already cut. Most Christmas trees are now grown on farms instead of in forests. The trees take 6 to 10 years to grow. In some states, less than half the planted trees survive the weather conditions to become someone's Christmas tree. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. An evergreen tree is a Christmas tradition in many American homes. The tree is usually a pine or fir, dressed with lights and other colorful decorations. Families might buy a cut tree or go to a tree farm and cut one down themselves. Some people bring a live tree in a pot into their home for the holidays and then put it back outdoors. Some people rent a Christmas tree. Companies might bring the same live tree to the same family year after year. Or the tree might get planted in a park or someplace else where it could help the environment. There are some trees that can be reused year after year because they are made of plastic or metal. Another popular evergreen this time of year is the mistletoe plant. It has small white berries and leaves that feel like leather. The traditional Christmas mistletoe is native to Europe. Ancient Druids believed mistletoe had magical powers. The plant can be found growing on apple trees, lindens, maples, and poplars. Mistletoe is a parasitic plant. It connects itself to a tree and steals nutrients and water. Today, Mistletoe is best known as an excuse to steal a kiss at a Christmas party. Kissing is a tradition if two people stand under mistletoe hung in a doorway. Another plant that many people connect with Christmas is the poinsettia. Poinsettias are native to Mexico. They can be white or pink, but most are bright red. They are named after the first American ambassador to Mexico. Joel Poinsett liked them enough to send some back to the United States. Babies or pets that chew on poinsettias might get sick. But experts say the plant is not as poisonous as some people think. Like millions of other houses, the home of America's first president was decorated for Christmas. George Washington's Mount Vernon estate is in Virginia. Visitors heard stories about what Christmas was like at Mount Vernon in the 18th century. The museum, where visitors began their tour, was decorated with Christmas trees. Yet Mount Vernon would not have had Christmas trees during the late 1700s when Washington led the country. They did not become popular in the United States until the 1800s. Visitors learned that in Washington's time, there was greenery inside the mansion, but that was probably the extent of the decorations. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Organic farming avoids the use of chemical pesticides and man-made fertilizers. Supporters say organic farming is better for the environment than other methods. But studies have shown that organic farming often produces less food per hectare. That lower yield means feeding the world organically would require more land. But good farmland is limited, and scientists say deforestation from the clearing of land for agriculture is already a problem for climate change. In a new study, researchers wanted to measure the difference between conventional and organic yields. So they combined the results of 66 earlier studies. They found that some organic farms can yield almost as much as conventional farms, but most cannot. The findings were reported in the journal Nature. The study's lead author was Verena Seifert of McGill University in Canada. She says conventional farms usually have higher yields than organic ones. But some activities, environmental conditions, and even crops can narrow the differences. On average, organic farms produced 25% less compared to conventional farms. But yields of organic fruits and other perennial crops nearly equaled the yields from conventional ones. So did the yields of legumes such as soybeans. Legumes produce some of their own nitrogen fertilizer. However, organic vegetables and cereal crops had a lot lower yields compared to conventionally grown crops. Ms. Seifert says the soil on organic farms holds water better, and that can reduce the yield difference. Also, organic farmers can improve their yields by making sure crops get enough fertilizer. But increasing the nitrogen is harder to do organically using just animal waste and crop rotations. Organic farmers rotate food crops with plants that fertilize the soil. But while these cover or fertilizer crops are growing, food crops have to be grown on other land. And if farmers use manure, they have to feed the animals that produce it. And that requires grazing land or cropland. The United Nations says world demand for food will grow 70% by the middle of the century. John Reganold is a scientist at Washington State University. He says no one should dismiss organic agriculture as part of the solution. He says farming is increasingly a mix of organic and conventional methods. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. A listener in Nigeria asked us to talk about the Moringa oleifera plant. This tree or shrub is grown for food and other purposes. Jerry Moore is a plant expert with the United States Department of Agriculture. He says the plant is high in protein and rich in vitamins and minerals. Not only the fruit, but also the leaves, roots, and seeds can be used as food in some way. The plant is known by different names around the world. Moringa oleifera is native to the foothills of the Himalayas, from Pakistan to eastern India. Because it is native to that area, much of the research on the plant has been done by scientists in Pakistan and India. Its native range is narrow, but the plant is grown throughout the world. In the United States, it has been introduced in Hawaii, Florida, and Puerto Rico. Jerry Moore says the plant cannot grow where there is freezing weather. It resists heat up to 49 degrees Celsius. The plant also can withstand dry or wet conditions, so it can grow in many areas. Mr. Moore says the plant can be used to make many different foods. The leaves can be boiled and eaten in curry dishes. The fruit can be sliced and eaten, cooked, or pickled. Jerry Moore says the taste is similar to asparagus. The roots of the plant can be dug up, peeled, and used as a seasoning in the same way as horseradish. Moringa oleifera is related to mustard, so it can have a sharp taste. The seeds in the fruit can be fried and taste like peanuts. The seeds are rich in oil, but the bark of the Moringa oleifera tree can be poisonous, so be sure to remove it. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Two of Santa's reindeer, Comet and Dancer, got loose on a busy roadway in Texas just days before Christmas. Think we're joking? It happened halfway between Houston and Galveston. The reindeer's owner, Joe Mormon, is a professional Santa Claus, also known as Father Christmas or St. Nicholas or Kris Kringle. But unlike many other Santas, this one really does travel in a sleigh pulled by reindeer, except when he has to transport them. On December 14th, The back door of the trailer opened as he was driving them to an elementary school. Comet and Dancer escaped onto Interstate 45, not exactly the North Pole. Another driver alerted Santa, as he told TV station KTRK. Someone pulled up beside us, actually, and blew the horn and was waving and all that, and told us we had some animals loose. Well, my heart did not do too well. The morning traffic was heavy but slow, with people on their way to work. Drivers called the police, who at first thought they were joking. Yes, there really were reindeer in the road. Then Santa found that he had some helpers. People stopped traffic and got out of their cars. One woman took off her shoes and ran after the reindeer. Another person followed. But the reindeer themselves were the ones who ended the chase. They found a park and stopped to eat. Joe Mormon says he was more shaken than they were. He says God was with the reindeer, you know, and he takes care of fools and things that cannot take care of themselves. The story had a happy ending. Santa and his reindeer were able to visit the school children as promised. The Reindeer Owners and Breeders Association says reindeer are easy to train to pull a cart or sleigh. Greg Finstad at the University of Alaska Fairbanks says reindeer like people and are pleasant to have around. He says reindeer management is not very difficult. That's good, since he also says, and children might want to cover their ears for this part, reindeer is a basic meat in the cold climate of Alaska. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can watch a story about the runaway reindeer by KTRK reporter Deborah Wrigley at voaspecialenglish.com. Special English is VOA's daily news and information service for people learning English. You can also get English lessons 3 times a day, Monday through Friday, at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. The United Nations estimates that world food production will have to increase by 70% by 2050. A world population growing in number and wealth will require 1 billion tons more grain each year and 200 million tons more meat. The Food and Agriculture Organization says those gains will have to happen largely on existing land through sustainable intensification. Officials say the new report provides the first global assessment of the state of the planet's land resources. It says large parts of all continents are experiencing damage. 1/4 of all land is described as highly degraded. The greatest threats are losses of soil quality, biodiversity, and water resources. New agricultural methods and technology increased food production in many countries during the Green Revolution. Cropland increased by 12% from 1961 to 2009, yet production grew by 150%. But the new report warns that production rates have been slowing in many areas. In too many places, it says, practices that have increased production have also harmed the land and water. It calls for greater use of practices that can expand production while limiting damage to ecosystems. One such practice is the use of fertilizer trees. These are fast-growing trees and shrubs whose leaves and roots help improve soil. A recent study found that about 400,000 farmers in southern Africa are using them. The study appeared in the International Journal of Agricultural Sustainability. Lead author Alayede Ajudi is senior scientist at the World Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, Kenya. He says, basically, these are trees that can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert them into nitrates for fertilizer, for organic fertilizer. Farmers who planted fertilizer trees reported double the maize production of other farmers. In Zambia, the fertilized fields provided up to 114 additional days of food. Farmers say they need less rainwater if they use fertilizer trees. The trees reduce water runoff and soil erosion. Mr. Ajayi says the project began about 20 years ago when scientists were trying to identify the main threats to food security. The farmers themselves designed and managed part of the testing in the field and spread the word of their successes. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Mike Henry has a 2-hectare farm in Palmer, Alaska. About a year and a half ago, his goat Millie was giving him a hard time. She did not want to be milked. She kicked her back legs and stepped into the bucket that was supposed to catch her milk. But there was no milk to catch. All Mike Henry got was tired hands from his attempts to milk her. But he also got an idea. He designed a goat milking machine that does not require any electricity or motors. The Henry milker is a hand-operated vacuum pump. A person attaches a tube to the goat, and after a little pumping, the milk begins to flow. A gauge measures the pressure of the suction. The process uses a closed system to keep hair and dirt out of the milk. The milk goes directly from the goat into a container that is then placed in the refrigerator to keep the milk cold. Mike Henry has sold his invention to hundreds of people, mainly small farmers, who also hold other jobs, just as he does. Mr. Henry is an executive director in the Anchorage School District in Alaska. He considered spending more than $1,000 for an electric milking machine. But that seemed like a lot of money to milk just one goat. So he began to develop a device of his own. He worked with parts that he bought from an auto supply store and a Walmart store. He tried the invention on Millie. How did she react? She gave a little milk. As the months passed, he improved the device. Milking Millie became easy. Mike Henry began to think other people who owned just a few goats might be interested in his invention. So he offered one on eBay, an internet marketplace. The first one sold for $45. Interest grew. Today, he receives orders from as far away as Australia and New Zealand. The regular price is $149. Recently, he has offered the system for $119 plus shipping and handling charges at goatfinder.com. The system is advertised as safe enough for children to use. The ad also says it is not designed to replace commercial machines. The average milking time with the Henry milker is 10 minutes. Mike Henry says Millie now gives about 2 liters in half that time. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. What is your secret to gaining the cooperation of a goat at milking time? You can comment at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook or Twitter at VOA Learning English. I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Cacao or cocoa trees grow in hot, rainy areas of Africa, Asia, and Central and South America. Their beans are used to make cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and of course, chocolate. There are 5 to 6 million growers, maybe more. Many are poor family farmers with only a few hectares. West Africa produces more than half of all cocoa beans. Ivory Coast leads the world in production, followed by its neighbor, Ghana. The trees are usually in their 5th year when they start to grow the pods that contain the beans. The trees produce the most pods when they are 10, but they are still productive long after that. Workers use large knives to cut the lower pods and long tools to remove pods from high on the trees. Later, they break open the pods to remove the beans. A half gram of chocolate requires about 400 beans. The World Cocoa Foundation says an average pod contains 20 to 50 beans. And experts say growers may lose perhaps 1/3 of their harvest to disease and insects. But now scientists have genetic maps of 2 kinds of cocoa trees. These genomes are mostly complete and could lead scientists to new ways to increase production and prevent disease. Mapping genes is the first step to understanding an organism. Next comes learning the job of each gene. The American food company Mars took the lead in paying for mapping the genes of the Forastero cocoa tree. The Forastero provides 80 to 90% of the world's cocoa beans. Mars depends on those beans for its M&Ms and other chocolate candies. The company's research partners included several universities and the United States Department of Agriculture. The average West African cocoa farmer produces about 400 kilos of beans per hectare. But Howard Yana Shapiro, head of plant science and external research at Mars, thinks that science could greatly increase the yield. A competitor of Mars, Hershey's, supported the gene mapping of the Criollo, a far less common cocoa tree. CIRAD, a French government research center, led scientists from 6 countries in creating that genome. We'll talk more about the cocoa industry next week when we look at efforts to help child laborers in Ivory Coast and Ghana. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. You can read and listen to our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Farmers in the United States have grown genetically engineered crops since the late 1990s. Now, a federal agency is deciding whether to let a genetically modified animal into the food supply for the first time. A company, Aqua Bounty Technologies, has developed the Aqua Advantage salmon. The fish is an Atlantic salmon that contains genes from two other kinds of fish, ocean pout and Chinook salmon. With these genes, it can grow twice as fast as a wild Atlantic salmon. The company says the fish does not taste or smell any different from other salmon. The Food and Drug Administration says there would be no need for special labeling if the salmon is found to have the same basic contents as other fish. But critics say the genetically changed salmon is different from other fish. They say if the FDA approves it for sale, people should be told what they are buying. Americans eat mostly imported seafood. Last year, that included $1 billion worth of imported salmon, one of the top imports. Most of the wild salmon caught in North America comes from Alaska. That state banned farmed salmon from its waters years ago. Alaska Senator Mark Begich is leading a group of other United States senators, organizations, and businesses to try to stop the FDA approval process. Winona Hodder of the activist group Food and Water Watch says the Aqua Advantage salmon has not been studied enough for food safety. She says the 3 studies have very small samples. The data is not available to the public. And one of the studies is 19 years old. Ms. Hodder worries that the farmed fish could escape into waterways and reproduce with wild populations. And, she says, the idea could spread to other countries. She says there are fish farming operations in China that are very interested in this and that have a poor record of enforcing rules. But the company says most of its fish are raised at inland fish farms. And it has promised the Food and Drug Administration that it would only market female salmon unable to reproduce. David Edwards at the Biotechnology Industry Organization says the genetically modified fish is just a new technology. He says he is willing to eat the fish if the FDA says it is safe. What are your thoughts on this subject? You can post comments at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. American officials have sharply reduced their expectations for this year's corn and soybean crops. Farmers in the Midwest are struggling with record heat and the worst drought in years. The United States is the world's largest producer of corn and soybeans. In August, the Agriculture Department predicted that corn production would total 10.8 billion bushels this year. That was down 17% from a prediction made just the month before. And it was down 13% from last year's level. In addition, the average yield per hectare could be the lowest in 17 years. At the same time, the government predicted that soybean production would be 12% lower than last year. The price of maize, which Americans call corn, has hit record levels. Corn is a major part of animal feed, and so the price of meat, milk, and eggs is also expected to climb. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says average food prices worldwide rose 6% in July. The American drought was a big reason. Gawain Kripke is a food price expert with the anti-hunger group Oxfam America. He says drought in the United States affects the whole world because it is such a big food producer and exporter. The situation has renewed the fight between food and fuel. About 40% of the nation's corn crop goes into making ethanol. The production process leaves some of that in a form that can be fed to animals. Still, at least 1/4 of the American corn crop is now used for fuel. The United States requires that part of its corn crop be used in the production of biofuels. The use of ethanol has grown as government requirements have increased. But the head of the FAO, writing in the Financial Times, called for an immediate temporary suspension of that requirement. José Graziano da Silva said more of the American corn production could then be used as food or to feed animals. The American livestock industry is also urging Congress to suspend the 2005 law that requires ethanol in gasoline. But corn farmer Alan Bennett says doing that would hurt his town. This country relies on ethanol for 10% of its fuel supply, he says. Ethanol is good for America. The growth of the ethanol industry and competition for corn have helped parts of rural America that had been shrinking for years. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. American farmers first planted genetically engineered crops in 1996. Today, 80% of the cropland for soybeans, maize, and cotton in the United States is transgenic. Genetic engineering adds or changes genes in a plant to produce desired qualities. The United States is one of 25 countries where farmers planted genetically engineered crops in 2009. An agricultural biotechnology group says planting decreased in Europe, but the amount of cropland planted with the crops rose by an estimated 7% worldwide. The National Research Council, part of the National Academies in Washington, recently published a study. The study examined how genetically engineered crops have affected farming in the United States. It found that many farmers have better harvests, better weed control, and fewer losses from insect damage compared to traditional crops. Larissa Wolfenbarger is a University of Nebraska biology professor and a member of the committee that wrote the report. She says they found that genetically engineered crops can be better for the environment. For example, she noted that crops designed to resist damage by glyphosate need fewer pesticides that are more toxic to the soil. Glyphosate is a chemical used in Roundup and other weed-killing products. But some farmers have used so much glyphosate that a number of kinds of weeds can now resist it. David Irvin of Portland State University in Oregon led the committee that wrote the report. Professor Irvin says this means that some farmers are again using the more toxic herbicides to control weeds. He says the problem needs immediate attention. Earlier this year, a professor at the University of Western Australia commented on the overuse of glyphosate. Stephen Powles wrote about it in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States. He said, "Glyphosate is as important in worldwide food production as penicillin is in medicine for fighting disease." He called for better use of glyphosate-resistant crop technology. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can comment on our reports at our website, voaspecialenglish.com. You can also get our stories on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Europe's deadly outbreak of a rare form of E. coli bacteria has brought new attention to food safety issues. One of the problems when people get sick from food is that the simplest question is often difficult or even impossible to answer. Just what did the people eat that made them sick? Of course, one way to avoid these medical mysteries is to keep dangerous organisms out of the food supply. This is easier said than done, but scientists keep trying. Scientists in the United States have developed an experimental system that uses a high-tech optical scanner. This inspection system is meant for packing houses where produce is sorted for market. The system is designed to identify the presence of contaminants like soil or animal waste on fresh produce. These can be sources of Escherichia coli, better known as E. coli. E. coli bacteria naturally live in the intestines of humans and many animals. Most kinds of E. coli are harmless, but some can make people sick. The new scanner can also show damage and imperfections that might make the produce unappealing to shoppers. Scientists designed the system at a Department of Agriculture research center in Beltsville, Maryland. Moon Kim of the Agricultural Research Service led the team. He says they were asked to develop a method to detect contamination in produce. So they started with the apple as their model sample. The scanner uses a high-speed camera placed over the conveyor belt that moves the produce along. As the apples move along the belt, the scanner captures images of each piece of fruit. The system is equipped with an ultraviolet lamp and a halogen lamp that produces near-infrared light. A spectrograph device can use the near-infrared light bouncing off of an apple to show evidence of damage. The ultraviolet light can show contaminants. Moon Kim says the team hopes the system will be available to the food industry in the next several years. The scanner can direct a sorting machine to separate the bad apples from the good ones. The system is currently able to show the surface of only half the apple as it speeds by. The inventors hope to improve the process so it can show the whole surface. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn American English and much more every day at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Farms are spreading to unused city lots and old properties across the United States. These urban farms grow crops in areas where people rarely buy fresh fruits and vegetables. They have the power to change what people eat. They also have the power to influence troubled neighborhoods. Eco City Farms is an educational, nonprofit organization in Prince George's County, Maryland. It seeks to help the local community by teaching economic development, job training, and a healthier way of living. The group has set up farms near automobile repair businesses and fast food stores in urban neighborhoods. Social activist Margaret Morgan Hubbard founded Eco City Farms. She says the lack of fresh fruits and vegetables is a health problem for children and their families who live in nearby Bladensburg, Maryland. Eco City Farms offer several programs, including educational activities on agriculture, food, and finding jobs with environmentally friendly businesses. People can also learn how to cook healthier foods and teach others how to prepare meals. Recently, Philip Sidibe demonstrated his cooking skills. He prepared alako, a popular food in Cameroon, where he grew up. He and other young people not only cook their food, they also grow it in a large garden next to the Autumn Woods Apartments. Margaret Morgan Hubbard says the urban garden is an agent for change, and the young people are its newest supporters. She says young people work throughout the year, helping with the farm. They are not only farming food, but also making that food available to people who live in the community. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For the past year, the World Food Program has operated a project to prevent hunger in 21 countries in Africa. In the project, the United Nations Agency works with small farmers to grow more and better produce. The World Food Program buys the produce through local cooperative associations. Then it distributes the products within the country or area. The project works mainly with women. Sheila Sisulu from the World Food Program says the project aims to break a cycle that keeps people hungry. The situation is when farmers have to sell their produce at low prices after harvest, when supplies are greatest. Then they have to pay high prices to buy food for themselves during the lean season, when supplies are limited. But when farmers produce more food, they can sell more. And when they produce high-quality food, they can get higher prices. They can also store food for themselves and have enough money to buy food if they need to during the lean season. Sheila Sisulu says the farmers are now starting to earn profits through the project. The Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Fund for Agricultural Development help the farmers choose the best seeds and fertilizers. They also advise the farmers on the quality levels that the World Food Program requires to buy their produce. Two other groups recently launched a separate effort to increase food security in Africa. The groups are the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa and the New Partnership for Africa's Development. They say African governments have to increase their investment in agriculture in order to fight problems related to climate change. The groups want the governments to develop programs in seeds, soil health, policy, and markets. Former United Nations Chief Kofi Annan is the chairman of AGRA. The group's president, Namanga Ngongi, says many African governments are not meeting a target of spending 10% of their national budgets on agriculture. But he says investment has risen from 4% of national budgets to probably 5.5% today. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find transcripts, podcasts, and archives of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.